What if the thing watching you from the tree line has been waiting specifically for you? 3 experienced rangers vanished for hours with no memory of where they went. They returned with dirt under their nails from digging, but no idea what they buried. Identical symbols were carved into trees surrounding each incident site. Their equipment recorded sounds that made trained dogs refuse to enter the forest. DNA found at the scenes matched no known species. These rangers broke protocol to warn others. What they encountered doesn't just hunt, it recruits. My name's Derek, and I spent 6 years as a park ranger at Coldwater Ridge National Forest in northern Idaho. What I'm about to tell you happened during my 3rd winter there, and it's the reason I don't work in the woods anymore. I've never spoken about this publicly, but lately the dreams have come back. Maybe getting it out will help. Maybe it won't. It was January 2019, and we were in the middle of a brutal cold snap. The kind where your breath freezes midair and the silence gets so heavy it presses against your eardrums. I was stationed at the North Ridge Outpost, a tiny cabin about 12 miles from the nearest road. During winter, rangers take week-long shifts up there, monitoring weather conditions and watching for poachers or lost hikers. Though honestly, nobody hikes Coldwater Ridge in January. Nobody sane, anyway. I'd been up there for 4 days when I found the photographs. They were scattered around the perimeter of my cabin, partially buried in snow, Polaroids, old ones, judging by the faded quality and yellowed edges. I found the first one during my morning patrol, wedged between 2 rocks near the woodpile. It showed the front of my cabin, my exact cabin. The photo was taken from maybe 30 feet away, right at the tree line. The timestamp in the corner read February 1981. My blood went cold, and it wasn't from the weather. This cabin had been built in 2003. I knew because there was a dedication plaque inside. So either someone had faked an old photo, or something was very, very wrong with that date. I radioed down to headquarters. My supervisor, Bill, was a no-nonsense guy who'd worked these mountains for 20 years. Probably just some kids messing around, he said, static crackling through his words. You know how teenagers get. Print something vintage-looking, freak out the ranger. Bill, there's no road access up here in winter. Nobody's hiking 12 miles through 3 feet of snow to play pranks. Silence on the other end. Then, keep your sidearm close. Call me if anything else happens. That afternoon, I found 3 more photographs. One showed my cabin at dusk, all the windows dark. Another captured the side of the building, focused on the window of the small bedroom where I slept. The third was different. It showed a person standing in that same window, looking out. The figure was blurry, but I could make out a ranger's uniform. I was the only ranger assigned to this post. I lived alone up here. The timestamp on all 3, February 1981. My hands shook as I gathered the photos. This wasn't a prank anymore. This was something else entirely, something that made my skin crawl and my stomach twist into knots. I tried the radio again, but all I got was static. The weather must have been interfering with the signal. That night, I barely slept. Every sound made me jolt awake. The wind scraping branches against the roof, the settling of old wood, the distant crack of ice-laden trees splitting in the cold. I kept my flashlight and pistol on the nightstand, one hand always near them. Around 3 a.m., I heard footsteps in the snow outside. They were slow, deliberate, crunching through the frozen crust. I grabbed my gun and flashlight, my heart hammering so hard I thought my ribs might crack. The footsteps circled the cabin once, twice, then stopped directly outside my bedroom window. I couldn't see anything through the frost-covered glass, just darkness and my own terrified reflection. The footsteps didn't resume. Whatever was out there was just standing there, waiting. "This is Park Ranger Derek Walsh," I called out, trying to keep my voice steady. "Identify yourself." Nothing, just the wind and that suffocating silence. I stayed frozen like that for maybe 10 minutes, gun aimed at the window, before the footsteps finally moved away, growing fainter until they disappeared entirely. When dawn finally came, I went outside to investigate. The snow around my cabin was undisturbed. No footprints, no tracks of any kind. But there was another photograph, placed carefully on the hood of my snowmobile. This one showed the inside of the cabin. My cabin. The photo was taken from the living room, looking down the narrow hallway toward the bedroom. In the doorway of the bedroom, barely visible in the shadows, was a figure. It looked like it was watching whoever took the picture. Timestamp, February 14th, 1981. My legs nearly gave out. Something had been inside. I checked every lock, every window. Nothing was disturbed. No signs of forced entry. It was impossible. I tried the radio again. Still nothing but static. I was completely cut off. That's when I remembered something Bill had mentioned during my orientation years ago. He told me that before this cabin was built, there was another structure on this site. An old ranger station from the 70s that burned down under weird circumstances. He'd been vague about it, brushing it off as ancient history. I tore through the cabin's small filing cabinet, looking for any old records. Most of it was recent stuff: maintenance logs, weather reports, wildlife surveys. But at the bottom, in a cracked leather folder, I found something that made my blood freeze. It was an incident report from February 1981. The report detailed the disappearance of a park ranger named Michael Corrigan. He'd been stationed at the old North Ridge outpost, the one that preceded this cabin, on this exact spot. According to the report, Corrigan had been doing a routine winter posting when he stopped responding to radio calls. When a search team finally reached the outpost 3 days later, they found it empty. No sign of Corrigan, no sign of struggle, but they did find photographs scattered around the site. Polaroids of the cabin taken from the woods, pictures of windows, pictures of someone standing inside taken from outside. The report noted that the photos had been examined and showed Corrigan himself, though he appeared unaware of being photographed. The investigation concluded he'd likely suffered a psychological break from isolation and wandered into the wilderness, where he presumably died from exposure. The outpost burned down 6 months later. Electrical fire, they said. My hands trembled as I read the final line of the report. All photographic evidence destroyed in fire, case closed. But they weren't destroyed. They couldn't be, because I was holding them. I looked at the timestamps again. February 1981. Every single one. These were the original photographs. Somehow they'd survived. Somehow they'd come back. Or maybe they'd never left. That evening, as darkness swallowed the forest, I found one final photograph. It was on my pillow, placed there while I'd been reading in the living room. I hadn't heard a thing. The photo showed me sitting at the small kitchen table where I'd been just moments ago, reading the incident report. The angle was from the hallway, looking into the kitchen. In the doorway behind me, barely visible in the shadows, stood a figure in a ranger's uniform. The timestamp read, February 14th, 1981. But written in pen across the bottom, in handwriting I didn't recognize, were 5 words that made my heart stop. "You're taking the pictures now." I ran. I didn't pack, didn't radio for help, didn't think. I just grabbed my keys and ran to the snowmobile. My hands shook so badly I could barely start it. The engine roared to life, and I took off down the mountain trail, branches whipping past in the darkness. I didn't stop until I reached the main station 12 miles away, where I collapsed in Bill's office, incoherent and terrified. They sent a team back to the cabin the next morning. Everything was there. My clothes, my gear, the incident report on the table. But the photographs were gone, all of them. Bill tried to convince me it was isolation-induced psychosis, the same thing that got Corrigan. But I knew better. I know what I saw, what I felt. I quit 2 weeks later. But here's the thing that keeps me awake at night. The thing that's been gnawing at me for 6 years now. Before I left that cabin, before I ran, I grabbed my phone and took a picture of that final Polaroid. The one showing me at the table with the figure behind me. I still have it. And last week, I looked at it again for the first time in years. The figure in the doorway is clearer now, more defined, and I can see its face. It's me, wearing a ranger's uniform, standing in the shadows, watching. And yesterday morning I found something in my mailbox, a fresh Polaroid, still developing, the image slowly coming into focus. It shows my apartment, my current apartment, taken from outside my bedroom window. The timestamp reads, November 2025. I don't know what happened to Michael Corrigan in those woods, but I'm starting to think he never left. I'm starting to think the forest keeps you, makes you part of it, makes you watch the next person who comes. And now, every night when I turn off the lights, I wonder if somewhere out there in the darkness, someone is pointing a camera at my window. I wonder if I'm next. Or if maybe somehow I've already become what Corrigan became, the thing in the woods, the thing that watches, the thing that takes pictures. And if that's true, then somewhere out there, another ranger is about to find their first photograph in the snow. I never thought the forest could feel alive, not in the way people describe nature as beautiful and breathing. I mean alive in the way something watches you, follows you, and waits for the exact moment you realize you're not alone. My name is Marcus, and I spent 7 years as a park ranger at Coldwater State Forest in northern Montana. What happened during my last patrol is the reason I'll never set foot in those woods again. It started on a Tuesday in late October. The park was mostly empty, just a handful of campers wrapping up before the winter closures. I was doing a routine evening sweep of the western trails when dispatch radioed about a missing hiker. A woman named Sarah Connolly, 32 years old, hadn't returned to her campsite. Her friend reported she'd gone for a solo hike around noon and should have been back hours ago. I grabbed my gear and headed toward the trail she'd taken. The Ridgeline Loop, a moderate 5-mile path that most experienced hikers finished in under 3 hours. The sun was already sinking behind the mountains, painting everything in that strange orange light that makes the forest look both beautiful and wrong at the same time. About 2 miles in, I found her backpack. It was sitting upright in the middle of the trail, perfectly positioned like someone had carefully placed it there. Not dropped, not thrown, placed. The zipper was open, and when I looked inside, everything was still there. Wallet, phone, water bottle, even her car keys. Nobody abandons their keys in the middle of nowhere. I called out her name. My voice echoed through the trees, but nothing called back except the wind rattling through the branches. That's when I noticed the silence. No birds, no insects, just wind and the sound of my own breathing getting faster. I kept moving, following the trail deeper into the forest. The light was fading quickly now, and I clicked on my flashlight. That's when I saw the footprints. Sarah's hiking boots left clear impressions in the soft dirt, heading off trail into the dense woods. But there was something else. Larger prints following hers. Barefoot prints. Human-shaped, but wrong. The toes were too long, and the spacing between steps was unnaturally wide. Like whatever made them was walking with an exaggerated stride. Every instinct told me to radio for backup, but I was already a mile from the nearest road, and it would take another ranger at least 40 minutes to reach me. Sarah might not have 40 minutes. I followed the tracks into the trees. The underbrush got thicker, branches scratching at my jacket as I pushed through. My flashlight beam cut through the darkness, catching glimpses of broken twigs and disturbed leaves. Someone had definitely come this way, and recently. Then I heard it. A voice. Faint, echoing from somewhere ahead. "Help me!" It sounded like Sarah. I started moving faster, calling out that I was coming, that she should keep making noise so I could find her. But something felt off about that voice. It was too perfect, like someone imitating distress rather than actually feeling it. I found her 10 minutes later, and I wished to God I hadn't. She was standing in a small clearing, her back to me, completely motionless. Her clothes were torn, and her hair was matted with dirt and leaves. I called her name, and slowly, so slowly it made my skin crawl, she turned around. Her face was blank. Not scared, not relieved, just empty. Like someone had scooped out everything that made her human and left behind a hollow shell. Her eyes were open but unfocused, staring through me rather than at me. "Sarah?" I took a step closer, my hand instinctively moving to the radio on my belt. "Sarah, are you hurt? Can you hear me?" She smiled, not a normal smile, her lips stretched too wide, showing too many teeth. And then she spoke, but her mouth didn't move right. The words came out perfectly synchronized with her lips, like a badly dubbed foreign film. "He wants to show you something." My blood went cold. Who? Who wants to show me something? She tilted her head at an angle that should have hurt, almost 90 degrees, and pointed behind me. I spun around, flashlight swinging wild, but there was nothing there. Just trees and darkness and that oppressive silence. When I turned back, Sarah was gone. Vanished. I swept the clearing with my light. She couldn't have gotten far that quickly, but there was no sign of her. No footprints, no sounds of movement. Nothing. That's when I heard the breathing. Heavy, wet breathing coming from somewhere above me. I angled my flashlight up into the canopy and my heart stopped. There was something in the trees. I couldn't see it clearly. It seemed to blend with the shadows, its form shifting and unclear. But I could see its eyes. Dozens of them. Too many eyes for any animal I knew, all reflecting my light like a cat's, but wrong. They weren't in the right places. Some were where a head should be, others scattered along what might have been a body or bodies pressed together. I ran. I don't remember deciding to run. My body just moved. I crashed through the underbrush, branches whipping my face, my breath coming in ragged gasps. Behind me, I heard movement in the trees. Not on the ground, in the trees. Something massive moving through the canopy, branches cracking and leaves rustling as it followed. I didn't stop to look back. I just ran toward where I thought the trail was, my flashlight bouncing wildly. My radio crackled with static, and through the noise I heard a voice. My voice, calling for help, reporting my own position. But I hadn't touched my radio. The thing in the trees was calling for backup using my voice. I broke through onto the trail and kept running. My lungs burned, my legs screamed, but I didn't slow down until I saw the lights of my ranger station in the distance. I burst through the door and slammed it shut, locking it and backing away until I hit the opposite wall. The radio on my desk crackled to life. Ranger Marcus, this is dispatch. We received your call. Units are en route to your location, ETA 15 minutes. I stared at the radio. I hadn't made a call. Dispatch, this is Marcus. I'm at the Western Station. I didn't call for backup. Silence. Then, Ranger Marcus, you called 3 minutes ago requesting immediate assistance. You reported you found the missing hiker and needed medical support. That wasn't me. Another pause, longer this time. Marcus, your GPS shows you're still on the Ridgeline Trail, approximately 3 miles from the Western Station. Are you saying you're not at that location? My GPS was still in my vest. I pulled it out and looked at the screen. According to the device, I was standing in the middle of the forest, right where I'd found Sarah. But I was in the station. I could see my truck parked outside through the window. Dispatch, something's wrong. I'm at the station. I don't know what you're tracking, but it's not me. Stay where you are. We're sending units to both locations. I spent the next 15 minutes watching the tree line through the window, my hand on my pistol. Twice, I saw movement in the shadows. Once, I could have sworn I saw my own face staring back at me from between the trees. When backup finally arrived, they found Sarah's body. She was 3 miles north of where I'd seen her, lying at the base of a cliff. The medical examiner said she'd been dead for at least 6 hours, meaning she died long before I found her backpack, long before I heard her voice, long before I saw her standing in that clearing. They never found what made those barefoot prints. They never explained the radio calls made in my voice, and they never figured out what I saw in the trees that night. But I know what I saw, and I know that whatever is in Coldwater State Forest isn't an animal, and it isn't human. It's something that can wear faces like masks and voices like recordings. Something that watches and waits and mimics until you can't tell what's real anymore. I quit the next morning, packed my things, and left Montana entirely. I live in Phoenix now, about as far from dense forest as I can get. But sometimes, late at night, I'll hear my radio, the one I threw away before I left, crackling with static from somewhere in my apartment. And through that static, I hear my own voice calling out from those woods, still asking for help, still trying to lure someone else in. The forest is still alive, and it's still hungry. The radio crackled to life at 2:47 a.m., pulling me from a restless sleep in my ranger station deep in Whisper Valley State Park. I'd been a park ranger for 8 years by then, and I thought I'd seen it all. Missing hikers, bear encounters, illegal campers, but nothing, and I mean nothing, could have prepared me for what I found that night. Ranger Mitchell, we've got a situation at Sector 7 near the old lookout tower, dispatch said, her voice tight with something I couldn't quite place. Fear, maybe. Campers reported sounds, screaming, said it doesn't sound human. I grabbed my flashlight and radio, pulled on my jacket, and headed out into the October darkness. Sector 7 was about 3 miles north, through dense pine forest that even in daylight felt oppressive. At night, it was something else entirely. The beam of my flashlight cut through the fog rolling between the trees, and my boots crunched on fallen pine needles as I made my way up the trail. The woods were too quiet. That's the first thing I noticed. No crickets, no owls, no rustling of nocturnal animals. Just silence, thick and suffocating, broken only by my own breathing and footsteps. I'd been in these woods thousands of times, but tonight they felt different. Wrong. When I reached the coordinates dispatch had given me, I found an abandoned campsite. 2 tents still zipped shut, camping chairs arranged around a dead fire. Coffee mug sat on a log, half full and still slightly warm. A lantern hung from a tree branch, swaying gently in a breeze I couldn't feel. But no people, no sounds, nothing. Dispatch, I'm at the site, I radioed in. Campsite appears abandoned, no sign of the campers. Static crackled back at me, then nothing. I tried again. More static. My radio was dead, even though I'd charged it fully before leaving the station. Great. That's when I heard it. A low guttural sound coming from somewhere deeper in the forest, past the lookout tower. It started as a rumble, almost like a growl, then rose into something that made every hair on my body stand on end. It was screaming, but not like any scream I'd ever heard. It warbled, shifted pitch unnaturally, like someone was screaming while their throat was being torn out. My training said, wait for backup. My gut said, run back to the station. But something else, something I can't explain, pulled me forward. I had to know what was making that sound. I had to find those campers. I followed a narrow game trail past the tower, my flashlight beam shaking slightly in my hand. The fog grew thicker, wrapping around tree trunks like living things, and then I saw the first one. A backpack torn open, contents scattered across the forest floor, a sleeping bag shredded into ribbons, and blood. Dark fresh blood splattered across the bark of a massive pine tree about 7 feet up. The pattern was wrong, though. It wasn't dripping down. It was smeared upward, like something had been dragged up the tree. "Hello?" I called out, my voice barely above a whisper. "Park Ranger! If anyone's hurt, call out!" The screaming came again, closer now, from multiple directions at once. My mind struggled to process what I was hearing. 3 voices, maybe 4, all screaming in that same horrible, warbling way. But they weren't calling for help. They weren't forming words at all, just screaming. I ran toward the nearest sound, crashing through underbrush, my flashlight beam bouncing wildly. And then I saw him, a man, maybe 30 years old, standing in a small clearing about 50 yards ahead. He was facing away from me, perfectly still, wearing a torn flannel shirt. Relief flooded through me for just a second. "Sir, are you all right? I'm a park ranger." He didn't move, didn't acknowledge me at all. I got closer, my flashlight illuminating more of him. His arms hung at his sides at odd angles. His head was tilted too far to the left, like his neck was broken, but he was standing impossibly still. "Sir," I said again, now only about 10 feet away. That's when he turned around, or rather his body rotated to face me while his feet stayed planted in the exact same position. His legs twisted, bones crackling audibly, and his torso spun like someone was winding up a toy. His face. God, his face. His eyes were completely black, not just the pupils but the entire eye, and his mouth was open so wide I could see the hinges of his jaw had dislocated. That's when he started screaming. It was the same warbling, unnatural sound I'd heard before, and it came from deep in his chest, vibrating the air around him. I stumbled backward, my flashlight falling from my hands. In the darkness, I heard movement all around me. More screaming joined his, forming a chorus of absolute horror. I grabbed my flashlight and ran. I don't remember much of the run back, just branches tearing at my face and the sounds of pursuit behind me. Multiple sets of footsteps, all moving in that same wrong way, like joints bending in directions they shouldn't. The screaming followed me, sometimes close, sometimes distant. but never stopping. I made it back to the ranger station and locked every door and window. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold my phone to call for backup. Sheriff's department, state police, anyone. But my phone had no signal. The landline was dead. Even the emergency radio in my office wouldn't work. Just static on every channel. I spent the rest of that night huddled in my office, watching the tree line through my window. And they came. All 4 campers standing just at the edge of the forest, illuminated by my station's floodlights. They stood in a perfect line, bodies twisted and wrong, those black eyes staring at me. Every few minutes they would all scream in unison, that horrible sound drilling into my skull. At dawn, they were gone, just vanished like they'd never been there. When backup finally arrived around 8 a.m., my morning distress signal had apparently gone through. I led them to the campsite. Everything was exactly as I'd left it. Tents, camping chairs, coffee mugs, but no blood, no torn sleeping bags, no scattered belongings. The sheriff thought I'd had some kind of episode, stress-induced hallucination maybe, but I know what I saw. They never found those campers. The names from the registration log at the park entrance didn't match anyone in any database. No missing persons reports were ever filed. It was like they'd never existed at all. But I know they did exist, and I know they're still out there. I requested a transfer the next week. Got assigned to a nice, safe park in suburban Connecticut. Lots of families, paved trails, nothing creepy. But it didn't matter, because 2 months ago, I saw one of them again. I was closing up the visitor center at dusk when I looked out across the parking lot, and there she was. One of the campers from that night, a woman in her 20s, wearing the same purple jacket I'd seen in the scattered belongings. She was standing next to a minivan, and a family was walking toward her. A mom, dad, and 2 little kids. I ran outside, shouting at them to get away from her. But by the time I got there, the family was climbing into their van, waving goodbye to the woman. She turned to look at me, and for just a split second, her eyes went completely black. Then she smiled, a too wide smile, and walked away into the tree line. The family never made it home. State police found their van 3 days later, abandoned on a forest road about 40 miles north. Doors wide open, engine still running. No signs of struggle, no blood. Just 4 empty seats and a child-stuffed rabbit left on the floor. I tried to tell them, tried to explain what I'd seen. But how do you explain something like that? How do you tell people that there's something in the woods, something that looks human but isn't, something that takes people and turns them into whatever those things are? The Park Service put me on administrative leave, mandatory psychiatric evaluation. They think I'm losing it. Maybe I am. But last night, I heard that sound again. That warbling, impossible scream coming from the woods behind my house. I looked out my bedroom window, and they were there, all of them. The 4 original campers, plus the family from the van. 9 of them now, standing in a perfect line at the edge of my yard. They stood there for hours, just watching my house. Watching me. And the worst part? This morning I found muddy footprints on my porch. Small ones. Child-sized. Leading to my front door. I don't know what they want. I don't know why they're following me. But I know one thing for certain. They're not done. Whatever they are, whatever happened to them in those woods, it's spreading. I'm writing this down because I need someone to know. I need someone to believe me. If you're reading this and I've disappeared, check Whisper Valley State Park. Check Sector 7. Look for the old lookout tower. And whatever you do, if you hear screaming in the woods, don't go toward it. Don't try to help. Don't even acknowledge you heard it. Just run. Because once they know you've seen them, once you've looked into those black eyes, you're marked. And they'll never stop coming. It's 2:43 a.m. right now. 4 minutes until 2:47, the same time that first call came through. I can hear footsteps on my roof. Slow, deliberate footsteps, moving in that wrong way. And under my door, I can see shadows. Multiple shadows, standing just outside, waiting. The screaming is about to start again. I can feel it building in the air, that same horrible pressure that makes your teeth ache and your bones vibrate. I just heard my doorknob turn. They're inside,